Looks like a quiet group this time around. Yes, based on the general. Yes.
the lack of responses is indicative of that. I
guess. Crickets all around. No, it's fine. This happens. Like, not everybody is like getting rolling yet, and it sounds like the reference working group is going pretty well. So.
Hello, hello.
Steve, we are full of crickets in here.
Yeah, that's why. So I put that on the post. Like, we were getting pretty good in the habit of posting an agenda or canceling a couple of days prior. Did we want to shift to that again?
Maybe. Not everybody's really back from the holidays, and it's been kind of like everybody's sort of wandering around going like, what did I do here again, if I'm honest? So like I think like give it a little bit. Maybe we move back to that in February, if I'm honest.
Anybody got anything they want to discuss, or is it just happy to see other people in the world of lockdown?
If we got nothing else, I'll throw one little PR that I think is just broken because of CI and nothing else.
The link for signing agenda and stuff is there.
I mean, we have a bunch of people for a meeting with no agenda, and usually what happens is that then people like come up with things, and then we go on for like 40 minutes, and then, yeah. No?
That's why I like this group, is because we do that.
We already got to meet together this week for the reference call.
Figure I'll give people a couple minutes to show up. On the one I threw out there, the PR 880 over an image spec. It's been sitting out there. I think there was some agreement that we liked it. It was just hung up on a broken CI job, and I think that wasn't anything to do with this PR. It was just CI itself. Might be a very short discussion. Steve-O, do you know what's up with the CI?
What's up?
Do you know what's up with the CI jobs failing on the image spec?
Oh, again? I don't know.
I don't think it's an again. I think it's way back, and then we just never got around to.
Vincent, and I, and John Johnson went through and fixed a bunch of things. So if you have PRs that are waiting, it's worthwhile to go and rebase them. I also replaced ESC, which is a great project and cool. I replaced it with Go Embed to get rid of a dependency, but we didn't merge that one because Oh yeah, you already know about this one, Brandon. So I think you commented on it. It was a while back. But yeah, CI should be running. So, and that's my CI report.
I'll see if I can do some
So-
rebasing and see if that
Do-
fixes anything up for us.
Do they have a dashboard in? I mean, I haven't used GitHub Actions outside of some of the OCI stuff. Do they have a dashboard where I can look at like the overall health of? Is that under Actions? Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, this is exactly what I wanted. Something like that. So we can kind of see that the recent ones are all working.
What I'm trying to remember is if I've submitted the PR already, if those CI jobs get locked in at the time I submit the PR or not.
They should have.
Well,
I think
we
you
will
need a
find out.
rebase. I think you need a
Yeah.
rebase if there's changes. Which PR are you talking about? The handle matching index entries?
Yeah, the 880. I'll give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah, rebase that one. It doesn't look like it has the commit in there.
There you go.
Oh, hey, Vincent.
Sorry, I was 5 minutes, 7 minutes late. Is this making this a kind of a work session?
I think we finished work already, so now it's party session.
What?
Well, I was just giving my report on the state of the CI, Vincent.
Well, what?
broke.
What's the state of CI?
It's still broke.
No, it was broke, and then now it is no longer broke.
See, I did that to be able to troll you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, that is the state of the CI. It has gone from broke to not broke to theoretically unbroken, but we haven't seen a. We haven't. I don't think we had a new build since Vincent and I and John did some work on it.
Okay, rebase done, so we'll see what happens with this.
Anything else?
We need party music. I mean, I'm perfectly happy if this turns into a session of just approving my one PR. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, otherwise, I don't have anything else on my agenda.
That one was a straightforward approval, right? And it was, I think I LGTM'd it and we were blocked on the CI.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of back and forth with Vincent on whether we wanted to say the runtime requirements was like a platform requirements. I threw the comment in there, Vincent, that I was kind of intentionally leaving that out in case people had other ways that they were looking at their requirements for how they were picking their image out of the index. They had like an annotation they were looking for or something like that, they could make their own requirements.
Since this was a very quiet meeting, I wanted to bring back the extensions 111 PR. I'm just back from vacation, so no context. I'm just catching up. Just wanted to kind of like check in, or maybe have a deeper conversation next week if that helps.
1 second. I was switching computers around when Brandon was talking. What issue were you talking about, Brandon?
Mine was 880, the handling multiple index entries. And you had commented in there that you wanted to add a little clarification that there would be a platform requirement on the platform field. And I was intentionally leaving what the requirements were out of the PR because I figured some people would have requirements on maybe an annotation or something like that for their one specific use case. I didn't want to lock us in.
Maybe I need a link to that one. Okay, I've got that open now. I know.
The thought process in there, you might have some runtimes that look at an index of a whole bunch of images out there, and one runtime might know that it's able to pick a later image in that index list or later manifest for whatever it's doing. And so it may not look at the platform specifically. You might look at a different field to figure out, hey, this is some other field that I was looking for.
I see.
And so that was my generic ambiguous requirements term of whatever that happens to be.
So would that be possibly including like arbitrary annotations or otherwise?
Yep. And so you might have two images with the exact same platform. I keep saying images,
Yeah.
two manifests with the exact same platform list or
Yeah.
platform specification.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm sorry for waiting while my brain comes up to speed. Okay. So yeah, sorry, Sajay. The 111 progress, I have not re-looked at it since we talked. Now, the last comment was Steve-O's, and really kind of ingesting that, figuring out, a way forward on whether things are extensions or whether they're just updates to the API itself. Because I think that's one of the last time we were like really processing it and even comparing other works, like I was pointed to the fact that like OpenShift even has completely like broken out their own API to work around some of these features rather than making them part of the registry themselves, so they can have a route handler. And that's effectively, people are already like now using that in production of like just making their own routes. This is the same thing that I think y'all are kind of asking about with features with ACR and otherwise, of like, do you just make your own route completely and iron it out, or can we iterate on it inside the OCI, like within the registry API itself? Because at which point is it just an extension or like an actual update to the API, the distribution API? So Stephen's comment is literally when last time we were just kind of remulling through that, and I haven't even opened back up this aspect of my brain since that time.
Yeah. and all that comment was as I took your feedback, Vincent, and the other feedback we heard in this group and summarized it into that comment, because there was a couple of like inconsistencies that I think when asked about one specific example, we said one way, and then to give it another example, we said the other way. And so all this comment did was look at everything all together and say, here's how we can make this proposal consistent as an extension proposal. So hopefully we can take the spec, apply, like rebase this comment on top of the spec, and then we should be in pretty much agreement. What I did want to get some gauge on, did I miss anything in that comment? Were there still like concerns when we see it all together, Vincent? I know your brain's still loading, but that's kind of the question I have. Yeah, go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I was going to give Vincent a second to load his brain there. The only thing I was thinking of was that we were changing it from namespace component to namespace component operation, and makes sense. I'm good either way on that one. My original thought process was probably leaning more towards most of this is going to be like HTTP level, and so it would be a get, put, a delete, or something like that, and that was how you're going to define whether or not you're creating an object, deleting an object, listing an object, something like that. But if it makes more sense to throw an operation in there because we're going to have more use cases that can't easily be handled by HTTP, that's fine as well.
I think it's having the operation as being, well, okay, operation does sound like the gets in the HTTP requests. I think it's more like a subcomponent. Maybe operation isn't really the right word. It's more like the subcomponent.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree.
We go back
Operation's
and
a
forth
bad
even.
word.
We go back and forth even within the OCI spec and other places. Like if you do a tag delete, you're actually going down and putting the tag name in there and doing a delete operation, but you can do a tag list, and that's /list after it. So we're inconsistent even amongst ourselves normally.
So tag list is regrettable. And before this became an OCI spec, I actually had a PR. Because the reason we did tag list was to like affix like the like name, because you can have any arbitrary name in between there, and if you have tag list on the end, it affixes the like parsing, but you can just do it with a tag slash, and that was we just never got that change in. So don't use tags list as an example. That was a poor one. Operation, I agree, is a bad word. Functionality is kind of what I'm going for. That's not a very good word either, but it's like you have some component and then some collected set of operations that, because we're not really REST, it's just an HTTP API, and I don't know that we need to be, I don't know that we should force RESTful concepts in this, but yeah, if there's a better word than operation, definitely, because I don't want people to think they have to put like a verb in there by any means, because it could be like, you could have like references, back references, right? So like or you could have like, probably not a good example. You could have like manifest compatible types and then list those. Right? You could say like, here's all the compatible types for this manifest. I don't know if that's a good extension given the recent security thing, but like hopefully that like illustrates the idea.
Is it just component, subcomponent? Because you started using the word sub, but then you were struggling to finish a sub of what? Because it is a sub, because I agree with you, the operation is a different aspect.
Yeah, subcomponent implies that it's another component. And I don't know if it's more open than that.
Naming things is hard.
Yeah, naming things is real hard. Yeah, I'm fine with subcomponent. I can edit my comment if that works for everybody. Alrighty, Vincent. You have good words.
I do not. English is a second language here. I was raised in the South.
Constituent. Or module.
I know we haven't. Oh, no. What? No. I don't know. I'm about to make a comment, but it has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
If we go by the reference type discussion from earlier this week, I think the keywords are thing and stuff.
I object.
The namespace is thing 1 and thing 2.
I think my brain is still just trying to process, like making sure, since we don't do much with like ACL speak otherwise, making sure that whatever these paths are that are kind of like embedded and discoverable, whether it's registry level or repository level, that not too much is like recreated. So like if you have some extension that's dealing with the digests or, you know, whatever it is, manifests or digests or blobs or something like that, that those paths aren't just being completely recreated again. I don't want too much. I'd hate to see too much redundancy forced upon registry implementers, because now something is nested, but as long as there's enough in place that they can apply any ACLs that are not really specified how to apply them. But that's really the conversation comes down to, like, sure, you could mess up the APIs however you want to. The spec allows you to mess around with the API. You just don't want to do something that later gets stomped on. That, like, the spec is already in a place where you can extend it and have your way with a registry API. You just don't want it to be clobbered later. So
I guess
to some extent, like the whole extension this whole extension proposal is not really needed. It's just you want something to be kind of standard, you know, allowed to be standardized.
Yeah, the biggest key for me is the underscore. As long as we specify that, I think that clarifies a lot. On the ACL part, though, since this is only going to be used by newer clients, newer tools that are knowing they're going to be looking for their stuff, if anything changed in the auth, that would be able to be handled because you've got a newer component that would know how to do its newer auth does its thing. Where I'm going with that is right now we've got get input as the 2 scopes you can request right now on pushing and pulling manifest and blob, stuff like that. If they want to add additional scopes within this extension area for doing other operations, is that something you're thinking along the lines of, Vince? Or
but so I get that, and that's fine. So if we venture down the path of just saying, like, if you see an underscore something, you know, the beginning word object, like the first character is an underscore, then assume this is some kind of extension, then figure out who owns this extension. And that was most of the original thought for this PR, was to discover if there is an extension and where are the docs about it, or who owns it. Like, where can I learn more about what the paths I should expect on this are? So, like, before getting into like the whole namespace component operation, or, you know, like that kind of pattern, that, like, who owns it? Where do I find information about it? So if you encounter a path that's a underscore something, then what can I expect to tell me how to interact with it, or if I just know what I'm doing when I see underscore OCI blah 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 blah, and it must be documented somewhere. That's the only, because when it comes down to it, there's no need to actually have extensions because you're allowed to mess with the API already, or you're allowed to like add stuff that's not in the specs if you wanted to.
I think what's good that we're doing though is we're saying this is how you mess with the API in a way that's compatible with other people messing with the API.
Okay.
And so it gives that common delimiter there saying, okay, as long as everybody plays by the same rules, you can have multiple people adding their own extensions on there and you're not going to step on each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people try to write something, they're trying to look for existing. That's why like Stack Overflow is so prevalent. Like, how do other people do this? Copy paste. So we can give them that pattern, then it just makes them more productive. And to Brandon's point, it gives them, we don't clobber on each other. And your point about if I see an extension somehow because I'm looking at some, network traffic, like, oh, that's not in the OCI spec. Where would I find that? That's a valid question. I don't, maybe that's what the root namespace of the underscore thing says is, oh, I look for that project to figure out where the documentation might be. But I think at this point, we just try to free up a consistent path for people to use. Pattern.
Do we as OCI even really care too much about component operation, that sort of stuff? Or is it more once it's gone to the underscore namespace and we've said, okay, that belongs to such and such, they can kind of do what they want to. Here's general guidance on how we typically think people should extend it. But, once you're under that underscore area, that's your own namespace. If you want to do something crazy, that's your problem.
Guidance versus enforcement. They're not going to get dinged on a OCI compliance because they didn't follow the exact path.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I read the comment is underscore OCI ext discover is a guidance, and the default extension for discovery is implemented in that way. Whether we force other extension authors to implement it that way is, I don't think that's what we are saying, but this is the guidance, is how the comment is written at this point. The other thing is we have problem with things like catalog. My hope is that if we introduce something underscore again under the OCI spec, it doesn't clobber over underscore something that is implemented by a registry operator. So we know that underscore OCI is where things might be, or if the specification revs, it doesn't affect any of these, and it doesn't clobber any custom implementation from other operators. That's the motivation of at least kind of parking and saying that underscore something is how you can evolve, but you can find other extensions if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
I almost want to throw the catalog under this just to say that, it's yet another example of an extension that nobody likes.
Yeah, Stephen.
Everybody really wanted the catalog when we implemented it.
I still like it.
I mean, the catalog is obviously a namespace that doesn't follow this. We're gonna have to reserve it. So I mean, I guess summarizing the concern here is we don't have a registry for the namespace, and that different extensions could clobber each other and be mutually incompatible. Is that the general concern, or am I misunderstanding something?
I got the feeling we are doing that here within this PR, saying that if you make your own namespace, you need to come here and reserve it with us just to keep it from getting clobbered by anybody else.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean,
isn't that the ext directory that we were creating?
Well, oh yeah. I guess as the PR is currently, yes, we can absolutely do that. I mean, I think just like, hey, if you don't want it to clobber, you better try to register it. We need to have some rules about that so people can't name squat. Like when I register underscore like Steve's shady crypto extension, right? Like, underscore crypto or underscore Steve crypto.
It requires a pull request to this repo though, right?
Yeah, it
So
should have a
you're
pull
gonna have to deal with
request.
us.
It should have some context, maybe a project, and a contact. And if you don't register it, you just risk being mutually compatible in the future. And it's not like a requirement, right? It's like here's your risk.
That's what I was hoping for. Is like,
Yeah.
you can already mess around with the API or add on to it. And that's the whole point of the compliance check, is like, cool, you meet minimum compliance, and anything else you did that isn't in the spec, I don't actually care about. That's a tailored solution. And so then here, if you could come in and actually say, just discover whatever extensions are available, and like, oh wow, there's all this other stuff. And you get this JSON body back that's like, and here's the docs for our README, and some of them might be like the open containers repo docs. I mean, it's probably been standardized and accepted upstream, but effectively is just an extension of the, an iteration on the API itself. But if you're maintaining Steve's shady crypto, then you could have something returned in your JSON body for your registry that says, here's the docs on the API for my shady crypto. And I don't really care if I'm not using your registry, or if somebody else implements your extension.
Yeah.
Great. It's almost like how do we have a pattern for RFCs or whatever docs on, like, oh, I encountered this HTTP header. What is it? What it do? How do I interact with it? If it's there and I don't do anything with it, then I don't care. Okay. That's enough conversation. Not looking to bike shed, just make sure we're all on the same page. Then if it pairs down, or at least in the same heart of it. I've got a PR where I was fixing up, like after I'd merged into this 111, I'd merged Teja's stuff, but there's a few places where it was inconsistent from a couple of files, which is fine. So like my local working branch is kind of a mess right now. We talked about it, and then I unplugged for the holidays, so it's good to get back into that. And I mean, largely, is there anybody knee-jerk reaction like wholly against this? I think John, at some point you'd said, what's the point? But given this discussion, is there any counterbalance on your opinion on that, John?
I don't have too strong of an opinion at this point. Ideally we add any extensions just to the API if everyone loves them, but I get the need to have your own namespace and experimentation and registry specific things. So
yeah. And effectively by becoming something, if it was like underscore OCI blah blah blah, then it is part of the API. It's just kind of isolating them.
Yeah.
And giving yourself space to iterate, and possibly even like I wouldn't doubt in this piece that like underscore namespace could be like it. Yeah, I don't know that we'll ever get off of the lead in /v2, but I'm sure some of these extensions, somebody might even iterate their own versions of an extension. Like the component name might have a version built in, like refers v1, refers v2. If you made a formidable change and it's still part of the API.
Although they could also do maybe an accept header on that. Go ahead, Steve.
So I just made a comment for module over operation. I don't know if it's popular. If you hate it, downvote it. If you love it, right emoji. I do want to sum up our requirements for extensions. I'll sum up what was said here in the comments in the in another comment on that issue. And just so I understand what we want people to register in name.md with the you know, with the idea that if they register, they're going to avoid having conflicts in the future. And do we want to remind people that they can do whatever they want, or is that like kind of implied? Like, because I hear that like some concern that people can do whatever they want and still kind of be compliant, but I don't necessarily. That seems like an extreme, right? Like it seems like people want to be mostly compliant, and these extensions, if you follow the extension path, you get like a roughly compatible system with other implementations in the future. And I'm using roughly, very roughly here. They will likely be compatible if you follow this. Like, and I'll say it. We don't know it's a bad idea until we try it. I don't know if that instills confidence, but I hope that we can. Let's try this. I'm saying, like, this has been, we've been talking about this for a long time. Let's give this a shot and let it bake. And if it doesn't work out, we'll try again.
Okay.
I think Sajay brought it up, and I think the big one that we're looking at right now is the reference type stuff. Doesn't make sense to just go ahead and try it right now with some of the reference types, see what looks good, what doesn't look good.
No, yeah. Right now, Sajay's leading the pack on actually like roughing out the edges on this. So I appreciate the feedback there on like, actually we found this, you know, these subsets don't do or don't work. Like,
so thumbs up from us.
I particularly don't like being in the position of talking about something before it's actually been tried out. Like waxing pontification before it's actually been tried.
We went through a couple of iterations, like you said, like V1 and V2, and this looked good to like after multiple rounds of discussion with Teja, and I think Hill, who's picking up from Teja at this point in time. So we're happy where the PR is at this point. I don't have any concerns. So I think it's a good read from the call that there's no major knee-jerk reactions at this point in time. So, and we have the ORA spec and the working with the reference type working group can probably lead the same direction if they want to go that way. To me, it looks good.
Good. Okay.
Cool. 2 items done. And CI fixed.
I even got 2 approvals on my requests in that meantime.
I just wanted to issue another CI report. The CI is now working and confirmed recently working.
But clearly it's stable.
It worked twice.
If you have nothing else, we can give folks 20 minutes back.
Just the same you were saying in the beginning, we could turn this into 40 minutes. We did. All right.
This was productive. This was productive though, because we closed out like 2 areas of conversation that I think we've been unable to close out.
I think the main thing is just for people that have busy schedules is to let them know what's coming so they can plan to attend the meeting or not. So I think we wound up with the right people here today for these 2 things, but if somebody wanted to be part of it, they didn't know this was the topic to cancel some other meeting and show up. So just the proposal that we do add something to the hack talk for the agenda a couple of days prior. This way people can plan their week. That'd be great.
Yeah, since progress is made, might want to pop that out into the email. Steve, just tell them, yeah, we made some decisions today, blah, blah, take a look. I mean, we're not finalized on, you know, these these changes because we haven't done releases, but they're going into master. So
Right. Yeah, master becomes the stage for the next release.
yeah.
And is subject to change, I think, is one of the things we talked about before. Like, let's at least get it in main so that there's a reference point there. And if as people start to implement it, they find problems, we can iterate on it before the next release is cut. But instead of using a PR in some random state as the reference point, main is the reference point. So that's good.
And to your earlier point, Steve, probably just a internal reminder to ourselves that a day or two before the meeting to probably drop a little Slack note out there to say, hey, anybody got a topic, drop it in the HackMD before,
Is
end
there?
of day.
There's a Slack bot. Hold on.
Slack bot?
Yeah, there's
Reminder
all
bot
kinds
on
of
the channel.
bots that you can actually say a reminder.
Yeah, you can do a slash remind in there and
Yeah,
generate
that's
one
one.
automatically.
I've meant to do that before, and now, for whatever reason, I think about it as you're talking about.
I mean, somewhat different, but tied off of Slack. We have started to lose some of our older conversations because we are sitting on a free account where somebody is paying to run the service for us, the developers doing it. So I did post a comment to Chris on the general channels, like, is this something we might want to pay for so that we can get the features of the history?
They are paying for the bottom tier of Slack, just not the full featured. Like it's when we first started, I mean, like I'm personally, like, Slack is fine. I don't think it's a good community tool because it's got barriers and like history is locked in a box. But the first thing is only 10,000 messages for an entire server. So across all channels, after 10,000 messages, it just falls off.
Right.
So we are on like some lower tier paid plan, but it still has limitations. They're just apparently adding new tiers, super pro, blah, blah, blah.
I would say in general, if there's something that we want to save for historical context, it makes best sense to get it within a GitHub PR commit, something like that, where it's more permanently tracked that way. There is value to going back and looking at old messages, but I think as best we can to try to get it over there.
All right. That's a wrap.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Have a good one.
Thank you.